a place of remembrance at Monticello.
It's an extraordinary place. You just feel the weight of history when you go there. When you arrive at Monticello, you will, for the most part, probably arrive at the visitor center. The visitor center has a series of landscape parking trays that are near there. One would be forgiven if you got out of your car and raced right up to the visitor center and did what you do at visitor centers, and then you take this little shuttle bus up to the mountaintop where Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello, actually is. But sandwiched in between all of these little parking spots is a burial site. Unremarkable to the eye, but remarkable to descendants. It's a place where an estimated 40, 45 enslaved persons were buried. There are no formal tombstones or anything. But the idea was that so many people completely bypass this, that it becomes something that is completely forgotten and overlooked. The goal of this was to make sure that the burial ground becomes an integral part of the experience of visiting Monticello, that you cannot look away from it. And so this was a way of just trying to make sure that when you either get out of your car and make your way up to the visitor center and or when you come back after visiting the mountaintop, that you think about the lives of the enslaved and what they did to make sure that Monticello actually could happen. So we restored the burial ground and created a new fence and created a pathway that allowed people to meander around the perimeter of it. Now, the second part of this is the contemplative site. Again, for those of you who've been to Monticello, they offer several wonderful tours there, the house tour, the garden tour, slavery tour. And there's a lot of heavy stuff that is discussed there. And so they wanted to create a space at the mountaintop that allows the visitor to take in all of this, to come to his or her own conclusions, but non-didactic space, but a place where you can be by yourself or with your friends or family that you've visited the place with, to think about all that you've heard there and to be able to process this information about the 607 enslaved people who made Monticello work. It was not initially intended to be a memorial per se, but I think in some ways people are looking at it that way. But we worked very closely with the descendant community. We were talking earlier during this conversation about the importance of listening. And I think there are any number of projects where I can say that was really critical. This is so important to be able to sit down with descendants and hear their stories and understand what this space means to them. Together with an outstanding landscape architecture firm, Nelson Bird Wolves, we crafted this design which remembers, again, the 607 enslaved persons who made Monticello possible. So it's a place where you can sit by yourself. You can look out at this wall, which is about 60 feet in length. It's made of Corten steel. And in fact, you can see in some of the photographs how Corten, by its very nature, tends to stain. I remember when I was talking with one of the descendants who gave me the great compliment saying that it was very clear from the design that we actually did listen to the descendant community and what they were looking for. And he asked me specifically about the materiality. Why did you choose Corten steel? There were any number of reasons why, but one of which was I said, that I told him that Corten steel stains, and sometimes it's hard to get that stain out. And I said, that's really symbolic in many ways of the original sin of this country. We've got something that so many people are afraid to discuss, and we can't really, we don't confront these issues as a society here in the United States like we should. And so there's this indelible stain in this country that we try to get out, but we can't get out. And so the fact that this is a Corten steel wall that will stain is part of that thought process. Again, those sorts of ideas would not have been possible were it not for our many interactions with the descendant community. Sitting down and listening took a long time, and iterating over, different ways of how we want to think about this design. I mean, I I have any number of sketches we did and mock-ups we did that don't look anything like this. Case in point is when we began the design of the contemplative site, it's on a mountain, so the mountain slopes. One of the issues we were wrestling with was how do we make this as accessible as possible? A number of people have mobility issues, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't excluding a group of people as we were memorializing a group of people who were excluded from all that American has to offer. So we really were struggling with that, and finally came up with a design that was better in terms of accessibility, but still really didn't meet that moment. So we worked with the client, and we actually shifted the site about, I don't know, maybe 100 feet to 150 feet up the hill to the site where it currently is built right now. And it is a much better site. It is much more accessible and works in some of the long-range planning that's being done to make sure that the mountaintop is even more accessible than it is today.